Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Carlotta Cameli, and I'm one of the studio supervisor and lead conservator at the Ecclesia Stained Glass. Today, in my talk, I would like to give you an insight into the conservation work we carried out on the stained glass windows in Manchester Town Hall. So, I wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction into who we are. Ecclesia is an award-winning conservation company specializing in the conservation of stained glass, stone, and metal work. Our stained glass conservation studio is one of the largest and most experienced in the UK, with workshops both here in Manchester and in North Wales. We've got a large team of conservators, and they hold a wide range of academic conservation qualifications, such as DMA in stained glass conservation, as well as having other traditional hand-on skills required to work on historic stained glass and leather glass. Two of our team members also have the pathway membership under the ICON accreditation scheme. And if you're interested to know more about our work, you can also go onto our website and have a look there. So our specialist work package for the town hall involved the conservation of the stained glass windows of the Great Hall and the Bees Landing staircases, both areas of very high significance within the building. And in the picture, you can see a close-up of some of the windows on the top of the Bees Landing staircase. Our work started in July 2021 and reached completion in March 2023, requiring dedicated teams working here on site and back at the conservation studios. The repair and conservation of the glass focused on two approaches, depending on their overall condition. So we did some in situ repairs and in situ specialist cleaning, and then we also had to remove for full studio repair and conservation work some of the windows. So when carrying out a conservation restoration project, we always refer to and follow best practice and specific guidelines for the conservation and restoration of stained glass. These guidelines are provided by organizations such as the CVMA, which is the Corpus Vitriarum Medievi, ICON, the Institute of Conservation, and ICOMOS, the International Council of Monuments and Sites, and so on. And these guidelines, specifically the 2004 CVMA guidelines for the conservation and restoration of stained glass, are really helpful tools to understand and project conservation interventions that are ethically acceptable. So in the next few slides, I would like to introduce some of the CVMA guidelines and explain how we follow them throughout the whole project. So in this picture, we can see two of my colleagues removing a opener with a leaded light in it, ready to be transported back to the studio. And I wanted to introduce these guidelines just by quoting this part of them. And it says, the intrinsic value of stained glass is equivalent to that of any other work of art or cultural heritage. And therefore, its conservation merits the same degree of attention and professionalism, regardless of its date or monetary worth. So this was kind of the base of our conservation work, how we worked and what we were thinking throughout. So while collaborating with our team of specialists and the town hall, we set ourselves some specific goals to achieve with our conservation interventions. And these goals were to reinstate structural stability of each window, make sure that each window was correctly weatherproofed in order not to let any water or moisture in the building. And we also wanted to improve and retain the readability and legibility of the windows. So the first thing to do to achieve these goals was to carry out a thorough survey on site to determine which panels and windows would have needed a more thorough intervention than others. So in order to get an additional idea of the condition of each window, our team climbed up all the scaffoldings around the Great Hall and the Beast staircase in order to assess their condition. And here we've got two of my colleagues looking at one of the windows in the Great Hall. We took initial pictures, took some notes on the condition of the windows, and discussed the plan forward. Some of the windows, unfortunately, were in a very poor condition and in a desperate need of repair. And this process allowed us to have a clear and realistic view of all the work that needed to be done. And this is how we did it. So moving on to documentation, this is what guidelines require conservators to do. So it says full documentation of the preliminary research and of all steps, methods and materials of a conservation process is obligatory. Written condition reports prepared by a conservator must accompany any stained glass panel. So what did we do? So as we were required to carry out an ethically acceptable intervention, we took specific measures to take the best care of these windows and document their condition and the conservation work that each panel undertook. So in the image, you can see one of the rubbings that we took off one of the panels in the tracery of some of the windows in the Great Hall. If you want to have a closer look at rubbing, just like the one on the picture, you can have a look once we finish the presentations at the back of the room. There's a few of them hanging on the wall. This required us to obviously keep a photographic catalogue of each single panel in each window before, during and after our intervention. So that's quite a lot of pictures, but it was absolutely necessary to keep track of everything that was happening, everything that we were doing to every single window. And we also kept a written documentation in the form of reports, rubbings, as I said. We made maps of each panel in order to leave a trace, specifically for future generations of conservators, of what work was carried out, in what condition we found each panel, and what sort of needs that panel required. And we also managed to retain and archive any original glass that was required to be substituted and therefore removed from each panel. So in terms of transport, the CVMA states that stained glass must be handled in a very specific manner, and only specifically trained persons should remove or handle panels. And during transit, it is advisable to create stained glass panels in an upright, supported position. Here in the picture, you can see that my colleagues are carrying a box in which we had one of the panels stored into, so that we would carry it safely to our studio. So what did we do in this case? So in order to transport and store safely all the panels, we used custom-made wooden boxes made to accommodate larger and smaller panels in a safe way. These boxes were padded on the inside and were rigid on the outside. And we also then stored all panels in a purpose-built glass rack in order to be able to store these standing and without any chance to bow. So here in the picture, you can see our glass rack and my colleague just pulling out one of the panels ready to be conserved. So before any work was undertaken, we carefully surveyed and analysed the condition of all panels that were removed and brought in our studios. And many were the peculiar things that we found out. So we found out that the panels had several issues, such as broken lead and broken solder joints, broken and missing glass. We had a severe amount of dust, soot, cigarette smoke deposits and cobwebs. And then we had several structural failures, so the panels were bowing and sagging. So while working on these panels, both in situ and in the studio, we came across numerous previous interventions. These are part of the history of the windows and gave us an interesting insight into how the windows had been patched up over the decades. Previous interventions included in situ repairs with poorly matched glass types. In certain cases, the glass that they had replaced was of a completely different colour. Just bright green, bright blue, when the colours are not exactly that bright. We had putty repairs, strap lads, adhesive, tapes, and other unsuitable repairs. But again, these gave us a sort of insight into what happened during the history of these windows, and I think it was quite interesting. So, other than being soiled with an incredible amount of dust, soot, and grease, we found some of the pieces to have developed solarization. So, solarization is a phenomenon happening when a piece of glass is exposed to UV light for a long time and its components start reacting with the light, causing the color of the glass to change. So, as we can see in the picture, I don't know, you can have a look both like. These pieces were actually originally clear, and some of the brown pieces that you see here have changed color and have become of a darker color, and that's what's called solarization, basically. What we decided to do in this case is, even if the color had changed throughout time, we just decided to leave it in the window and just maintain it as it is, just because that's it, part of it, its history. And there wasn't any sort of justification to just start replacing loads of glass for no reason. So one of our challenges was definitely finding the right glass replacement and infills. And in this case, the guideline states that the insertion of infills in paintings and restoration of missing paint, rearrangements or replacements of later additions should only be undertaken when fully justifiable, based on thorough art historical and technical research. Such treatment must be guided by the principles of minimal intervention and reversibility. So, where we were required to repair or replace some of the broken glass or some of the poorly matched pieces, we had to do a meticulous research into what materials to use. So what we did is we contacted different glass manufacturers, experts in mouth-blown glass used for conservation purposes, such as Lambert's Glass in Germany and Saint-Just in France, and they were able to provide us with a perfectly matching glass that we could then use on the panels. And we also collaborated with a local glass blower to recreate some of the roundels on these windows. And if you want to have a look at some of the roundels, they are all on the table just at the back of the room, and you can pick one up and have a look. So after completing careful conservation on all the panels that we removed from the town hall, our specialised team of glaziers transported them in the purpose-made boxes back to the town hall and reinstated them in their original position. The reinstatement required lots of care and concentration, lots of patience, and lots of help to hand. The windows were reinstated and repointed following traditional techniques. And in the picture, you can see one of my colleagues just tying some of the copper wires on which basically there are some bars that are supporting the windows, and we've got copper ties to which the bars get tied onto. So we also carried out in situ repairs and cleaning, and it is stated in the guidelines that depending on the nature of and extent of potential, depending on the nature and extent of the required treatment, and bearing in mind the potential for damage during removal, conservation in situ should be considered as the first option. So this is what we did. Part of our studio team joined the site team to take care of those panels and windows that were in a good enough condition to not undergo full studio conservation. So thanks to the labyrinth of scaffolding, which you can see in the picture, provided throughout the town hall, we were able to access easily all the windows, and we cleaned them with the use of cotton wool, deionized water, wooden sticks and soft brushes in order to bring them back to life and carefully remove any sort of dirt on their surfaces. And we also carried out some in situ repairs where we used some of the carefully matched glass to replace any badly broken or missing piece. And finally, here we see Stephen, our project manager. Having carefully followed conservation ethics, the end result of our dedicated and careful intervention at Manchester Town Hall has been really positive. This has meant that we could play an important role in the conservation of our town hall, but also it has provided many people in our team with invaluable knowledge and experience, as well as being able to have had an active part in a project that happens only once in a lifetime. And with a picture of our team, I wanted to thank you very much.
Evening, everyone. My name's Navin Swanky. I'm a stained glass artist for the last 40 years. I came to this project through Shepley's Engineering. Shepley's gained a contract for all the frames that the stained glass house did, and they were looking for someone to start up the project. I basically set up the workshop deep in Old Trafford somewhere. We acquired this building. As you could see, it's an empty shell. So I got a selection of engineers to build tables, racks, cementing booths. And what we were up against was this, an overall breakdown of the panels. So a total of 4,459 panels. And then clean and repair in situ, 2,137. But the most important one for me was the remove and re-lead, 1,803. Replace with new windows was 519. So that's a lot of windows to do in 2 years' time. So we need to find a dedicated team to do this. Just to give you an oversight of the windows, basically they are constructed with tracery at the top. As you can see, they'll be set in stonework, elaborate stonework. Below that, you'll have an arch opening. The arch opening would consist of multiple singular windows. And as you see by the drawing, the majority of windows are in square quarries. This enhances the light to come into the town hall. Manchester is the brightest place in the world, so you need plenty of light in those corridors. And finally, you've got these number 15, which is the support, number 15, which is the window frame that allows the air to be functioning. They do have openers, but they're only restricted to a certain amount. And then finally, we have supporting bars going across certain areas. And this is the color palette that the town hall dictated. As Coletta pointed out, the roundels are at the edge. They are basically surplus pieces that were being thrown away. They were blown glass back in 1870, and they would blow the glass into big, large sheets, cut out the center, and use the larger sheets as pane glass to glaze windows in houses and that. And this little item there, someone had the bright idea to put it back into the town hall. This palette that you see here, these are sort of muted colours. And back in the day, the Waterhouse must have thought to himself, the grey skies of Manchester, he wanted to reflect the colours. So that's why that palette has greys, and the brightest colour there is that red, but that's used very sparingly. The reeded panel at the edge is basically in the basement, and we had to find that in America just to do the restoration with that. Here is our restoration team that we found. We had six or seven people who were qualified stained glass people. The rest of them were trainees, people that were residing in Manchester. There were various artists, college graduations, dare I say landladies, but we gave them an intense program of working on the panels. First, you'll see here, this is part of the stateroom, as you see. It's a very simple window, but the trainees would be taking apart the outside lead, re-leading it, and doing minor repairs. This is always overseen by myself and the other stained glass artists as the quality, we couldn't let it drop. As you can see, everyone's in their high-vis jackets there because it's very cold in that workshop. This is the re-reading of the panels and removal. So the 3 panels there would be assessed by the architect. The poor guy was working in the town hall 3 years prior to even the construction ever started. He went through all the windows, recognizing what needed to come out, what not needed to come out. And then he identified what breaks there were. Then he put that to the tender. That's how we got the job with regards to the financial aspect of it. And we're talking, simply millions of pounds here. And then you can see in the last little picture there, the people removing the glass. And here is how the glass came over to us. The panel that you see on the left there, that's from the prison block at the bottom of the town hall. It used to be a magistrate's court, and they've got cells down there, and that's not black glass. Someone painted that black, and the architect had insisted with me that he wanted to use that glass, so any glass I could salvage would be used again. The other picture will show you the conditions of the windows that I got. They were simply very dark grey. We only had ionized water, little sponges, and a lot of skill and elbow grease to make them clear. Here you see that my colleagues and the trainees even were doing assessments. So they would look at every individual panel. From the time the architect saw it to the time it came to us, there might be 2 or 3 different breaks on it. We had to record this, so tell the architect this would be X of funding. Sometimes he agreed, sometimes he said it was our fault. So it was it was a bit sort of a thing. Anyway, they've resolved that matter. The one on the right there, you can see is a window that we have to re-red, and that's one of the hoppers. That's the opening, and they're always in bad conditions because it's obviously opening and closing all the time. And this is where the windows that we took out for the staterooms are. Quite a nice long corridor. If you look at the facade of the town hall, they're located on the first floor, and that's where the Queen would probably come. Loads of weddings going on here, and I think they shot Sherlock Holmes there at some point. Back to the studio. Once the studio was established, this is us in full flow, people doing assessments, people cleaning, and as you can see, there's a lot of extractors and stuff. Shepley's is renowned for his health and safety aspect, and they made sure that we had free monthly lead checks, because we're in a confined space and there's a lot of lead dust. We had to keep on getting monitored all the time. Sometimes I led the pack. This is upstairs now. I really appreciated that the team were very, very focused on it. Sometimes you could walk upstairs, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was concentrating on their work. Hence, people used to just wear headphones and get down to it. This is finishing off the clock tower. Once that window there in the green is installed, you will see it illuminate the clock tower around Manchester. At the moment, they've got the scaffolding around it, but once that's in, it'll be fantastic. And then downstairs is just more assessments and more panels that we have. We had a television crew down, so if you do get an opportunity, just have a look at the Yesterday channel. And we're under the Great British Landmarks. There's various buildings in there, but Manchester Town Hall has a slot in there. And it's a very, very interesting program. I think the Masons are in it, and the Mosaic people are in it, and the metalwork people. It's quite an interesting show. So reletting the panel, rebuilding them. So basically what we have to do is take the panel apart, and at this process we would identify any breakages, and using the palette of glass that we had, we would recut and reshape the new pieces, and then the process of leading will be done. And this is done on a rubbing. As you can see underneath there, this is sort of a sketch. Claretta pointed out to you that there's some behind you that you could look at. But if you follow that rubbing precisely, you will have the size of the window that's going to go back into the hole. And then, therefore, it should fit. Some do, some don't. But usually it's trimming them down. Here's another example. As Claretta pointed out, that the rubbings are a historical record of what we've done, and they'll be kept in the archives in the town hall. They always used to give you a size of the lead, what was broken, what we did. So it's a great document to have a look at. If anything in the town hall ever gets broken, they will identify what window it is and pull out the rubbing to have a look where it is. And these are some more panels ready to be fixed. On that light box, we will put the panels to see if it matches the rubbings and the quality of the work. We always had to keep an eye on the quality of work, because obviously we don't want to be degrading the town hall. And this is just an image of us soldering the panels. Soldering is It's almost bringing the jigsaw together, and this is what keeps everything intact. I mean, you see Hollywood movies of Kevin Costner flying through windows. I don't think that occurs anymore. I think he'll be hitting the panel and staying there. So yeah, so that's an important aspect of it. So once the soldering done, we do a cementing. This is a liquid putty as such, and this is pushed into each part of the joint. Once it's pushed into the joint, we put this substance called whiting, as you can see in the picture on the right. Whiting is basically chalk, and that will dry out the liquid putty within 2 hours. Once that's dried out, we lay them horizontally for 2 weeks, and this will stop any oozing of the putty. And once that's done, we do the black and polishing, and then the final stage will be just polishing out panels. And this is the finished product that you can see there. So, I mean, I've just showed you a brief examples. There is more techniques to go in, but I think we've got limited time. I just wanted to dedicate this time just to say thanks to the team that we work for. Each of them had a dedication and a passion for the job. Each of them solely committed their works for 2 years, each striving for new panels, more complicated panels, and larger panels. Here we go with some more pictures of people working. We had a fantastic team, and I can't say anything less than I hope all that will carry on with us, staying in the craft. Once all the windows were done, we were out of the 1,803, we were 40 short, and we had to leave our workshop. Unfortunately, that they wouldn't do the lease again. So we recruited the artisan studio on Albert Square. So there's a little artisan studio where we've sort of taken over, and we're making the last 40 panels in there. This is a view of the town hall on the internal corridors. This is from the archives that Sue's got. Fantastic. I mean, you can see all the levels of the stained glass. Once you stand on the balcony there, these are the various floors. Each one would have a simplistic center, but a complicated tracery at the top. And this is our town hall team. So the people who was working in the studio came over to the town hall, still learning about how to install windows. A selection of us were experienced in that, and there was a couple of guys there who were really experienced in that. One of the chaps came in the 80s, where he was the one probably responsible for the green glass that went in there. I won't show you which one it is there. I think he did say he did it. And this is the installation. I just wanted to show you that the people and the scale of the job that we're still undertaking now. And I wanted to show you the individual people that are fitting and how excited they are. This is Carletta resting. And there's just some more finished windows. The one in the middle is from the stateroom. Thank you very much.